Joel Anand Samy is here to try and keep me in line. I bet he knows what day and what date it is. Joel, always a pleasure. Appreciate your time this morning. Joel, alongside Natasha, is host of America's Roundtable radio program that you can hear right here on SuperTalk Mississippi and lots of places all around the country. Joel is also involved with the International Leaders Summit. And Joel, I was thinking before, during the break and before our conversation begins, like I know what you do with the radio program and a little bit about International Leaders Summit, but I don't really know what it is that you do.
Well, thank you so much for having me on Super Talk Mississippi Media. It's wonderful. It's always a great joy and privilege to be with you and all the listeners in Mississippi and beyond the borders of Mississippi. And Richard, truly it has been a great season of what we're doing here in Washington, D.C. through the International Leaders Summit, America's Roundtable Radio, and then also our initiatives, including the Jerusalem Leaders Summit. So in the early 2000s, Natasha Sardorch and I, we launched a number of think tanks and specifically advancing reforms in Eastern Europe from that transition from communism to free market economies. We had the privilege and honor of working closely with Milton Friedman, a number of Reaganites, including Dr. Alvin Rabushka from the Reagan's tax policy team, and a host of the others, and really led the flat tax revolution that brought rates down, not only in Eastern Europe, but in Western Europe, that applied pressures to America because the EU average was at 22%.
Well, and certainly there has been a lot of work to focus on. You mentioned the Jerusalem Project. You've been very closely aligned with Israel and some of the coalitions that have been built here in the United States and even here in Mississippi in support of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu, at the White House last night. We saw the video from the dinner table. Also, the video. When he and his wife got out of their vehicle and were greeted by Donald Trump. And there is a very real kinship, a very real mutual admiration, it appears, between these two global leaders. What was the focus of this particular meeting, the third time that Netanyahu has been to the White House since Trump has been reelected?
You've stated it well, Richard, in light of the friendship that both President Donald Trump, and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu share. It reminds me of the strong relationship, say, between President Reagan and Lady Thatcher, that special relationship that was established between the UK and the United States. And in this stage, at this stage here, now we have America strengthening its ties with Israel, a great partner and ally in the Middle East. And so last night's conversation was certainly to focus on, this whole process. I mean, there's a number of initiatives on the table. One, for example, is the issue of Iran, and where there was a ceasefire in place. And Netanyahu was wise to just help our fellow Americans understand that Iran was on its way to building some 20,000 missiles to launching to a country the size of New Jersey. And then as far as, we are concerned, we're very much focusing on what's happening in Gaza at the moment. And President Trump on his watch would like to see this come to an end, this conflict in Gaza. In fact, Steve Witkoff is on his way to Doha to be able to engage in direct conversations with Hamas. And so this is a very important next step to bringing an end to the war that began with Iran, actually, on October 7, sponsoring, aiding, assisting groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis to attack Israel, where 1,200 people, citizens, were killed. And so at this stage here, there's some less than 20 hostages remaining that are known to be alive in Gaza. And that's one of the top priorities of Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as President Trump, in getting these hostages returned to their families in Israel.
Joel, why is there any reason to believe that a deal can get done with Hamas? Or Is this even really about getting a long-term deal done as much as it is about just getting back those remaining hostages? Because Hamas has told us, with their actions, we can't trust them. You can't trust them. Nothing is going to be lasting. Their word is paper thin at best.
Yes, Richard. At the end of the day, what we'd like to see is that Hamas is removed from Gaza. It is a terrorist group, and there are other splinter terrorist groups in Gaza at this very moment. I think the first thing that needs to be achieved is to have a ceasefire, the 60-day period of time where the 18 hostages are returned to Israel, and then focus on what we really are in awe of what President Trump has suggested, is to actually have Gaza transformed into perhaps like a Dubai or other countries in the Gulf states, which have really made great changes. But that cannot happen with a terrorist group, Hamas, there. We certainly want to see Hamas removed. And I think with what President Trump has really suggested is to allow the people of Gaza, just their free choice, to move out of that specific territory in order for Israel and other countries like Saudi Arabia to be able to remove all these undetonated bombs, these explosive remnants of the war, so that people will be able to return to a safe place. I recall being in Vietnam just 25 years after the Vietnam War, and the day that we were right in the Da Nang region, right by the DMZ area, landmines exploded, killing 2 children. And so we know how these things are very dangerous, and President Trump is right, making sure that we clean it up before people are able to return to their homes in Gaza.
Joel, you mentioned Saudi Arabia, and it's such an interesting country to me in terms of its leadership, with Mohammed bin Salman as the crown prince. I don't think there's any doubt that ultimately he's going to be the king of Saudi Arabia. He wields so much power there. There is a legitimate desire from MBS to diversify that Saudi economy, to not become just reliant on oil. But he knows that oil is the catalyst to do all of those things and be able to invest in all of these other things. And yet at the same time, the human rights record for Saudi Arabia, even under MBS's leadership, is at best questionable, but at times awful. Is that something that we just have to look past and recognize that maybe it is a work in progress, or is it just complicated? How do you describe that?
Well, Richard, what is transpiring in the Middle East is amazing, and it is difficult to describe it in words, but having been in the Middle East and having spent time on the Arabian Peninsula over the past decade and a half and seeing the changes there, it's unbelievable. And it's not just only the tall buildings that we see in Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, or even within Saudi Arabia, but it's the changes that leaders, reform leaders, a new generation of leaders in the Middle East are bringing forward, like Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, as you've rightfully stated, as he's called in the region. So what MBS has done is not just only focusing on diversifying Saudi Arabia's economy, but really working on internal reforms. And yes, the media reports have not been very pleasant, but the truth of the matter is that what we have seen in Saudi Arabia is an important transformation taking place, where they're moving away from what we had seen in the past of this very radical movement within Saudi Arabia and much of the Middle East and beyond of Wahhabism, and then moving towards more of a moderation and allowing and empowering women in Saudi Arabia to obtain positions in the academia, in government. In fact, Saudi Arabia's top diplomat to Washington, D.C. is a woman in leadership. And that's not just only for the United States, but for other countries as well. So we are seeing a new day in Saudi Arabia. And having been in the region, seeing this transformation is amazing. And in fact, we are pleased to relay that we look forward to hosting the United States Saudi Arabia Leaders Summit in the months to come. We've been invited by leaders in the region to do so, and we look forward to bringing leaders from the business sector to be a part of this endeavor.
Joel, you got time to hang with me for a few more minutes, or do you need to run?
In fact, it'll be a great honor and privilege to hang out with you for these next few moments. Absolutely.
Sounds great. We'll take this conversation a little bit deeper on the other side of this break. It's Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi, with Anand Samy from America's Roundtable. We're back right after this. Thanks for being with us. It's Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Anand Samy is my guest. He is host of America's Roundtable. You can hear that on the weekends here on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Also, co-founder of the International Leaders Summit, and just mentioned that on the horizon, a U.S.-Saudi Leaders Summit that hopefully we'll hear more about in the weeks to come. So, Joel, we were talking a little bit about Saudi Arabia, and it's such a complicated issue, and yet there are a lot of people that paint the relationship with the Saudis as black and white, as in we are good, they are bad, and anything other than that is disingenuous, and it's just a money grab. I think specifically about golf and the role that the Saudis have played in investing in sports, whether it's the Live Golf Tour or European soccer or other things. And people are quick to say this is sports washing, that they are trying to cover their humanitarian crimes by reaching out to people's passions through sports. And there may be an element of truth to that. There may be a large element of truth to that. But I'm curious if it's maybe at a different level, an attempt at normalization, a step toward trying to eradicate some of the bad and move, but because it can't all happen at once, right? I mean, it has to be a linear progression for the Saudis to change who they have been for hundreds, if not thousands of years, into what they would like to become. Does that make any sense?
You've really brought forth a very important topic, Richard, and it's so true. As you've mentioned about this linear progression that's taking place in Saudi Arabia, we're seeing this evolving in the Arab states, not just only Saudi Arabia, but UAE, Bahrain. For example, in the sporting industry, these countries are making an investment. Yes, certainly it has created controversy on the golfing arena and also in soccer, for example. But on the long term, what I believe that the Saudis and other countries in the region are doing are looking at good investments. And of course, sports and entertainment are growth industries. Tourism, for example, is a huge industry that's growing globally. And we have to really understand how tourism works too. People are traveling more than ever before since the pandemic days. Individuals are traveling over to UAE. There's so many entertainment centers, one of the largest malls in the world. Things are changing rapidly. And MBS in Saudi Arabia is actually an agent of change. He is really moving things at warp speed, reforming institutions, which is not an easy task by any means. And then at the same time, working with their sovereign wealth funds in making the right kinds of investments. They've partnered with Jared Kushner, for example. They have been able to engage America. And I think America has to look at this not just only from a very parochial perspective, but Saudi Arabia is a gateway to 400 million Arab consumers. So as a country of over 330 million people, for small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and even the larger corporations, that's a whole new marketplace for the American business sector. And also, peace and prosperity is something that MBS truly believes in. And I think that at the end of the day, we will see the Abraham Accords signed between Israel, Saudi Arabia, America, all coming together. And there's another element to this here with the demographic changes taking place on the Arabian Peninsula, which many people do not know about. For example, in UAE, Bahrain, and some of these other countries, the population has changed. So you have some 50% of individuals in UAE, in Bahrain, that are from South Asia, from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, that are not just only working to build the infrastructure, but are involved in the financial sector, in high tech, and in medicine. So some of the best hospitals and medical facilities in the world are not necessarily in America, they are in UAE. So things are changing, and health tourism will be a big thing in the years to come, and America has a good competition in that aspect of it as well.
Something that I've seen recently in some of the social media landscape is some of the MAGA influencers, or right-wing influencers, if you will, pointing to a threat to the United States that's not being talked about. Islam is the second largest religion in the world. We know that Islam in and of itself is not evil and does not preach war, but we have seen this bastardization of Islam that has happened over time, where people have co-opted that for evil and for justification of jihad and all of these things. But as Islam populations grow in the United States, there are people that have said, hey, that's the biggest threat to the United States. We've seen it in major cities in Europe, that massive Muslim population that has grown in London. We're seeing it in New York City with the growth of the Muslim population and the mayoral candidate there. How big of a concern is that to you?
Well, I think even Arab leaders, such as MBS and the foreign minister of UAE, basically communicated to journalists when they were trying to downplay, these are left-leaning journalists, about the radical form of Islam that has emerged in the West, especially in Europe, and now we're seeing in America, and specifically, like you've mentioned, in New York City. These leaders in the Gulf states are saying, listen, America, Europe, be careful about this radicalization of Islam. Even these countries have really worked to de-radicalize the Islamic religion from its efforts on, or its insidious work on this massive terrorism front and all of that, to focusing on peace and prosperity. So for America, I think we as Americans uphold the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights. And when individuals come to the United States of America and become citizens, they take an oath, and that oath is to the U.S. they take an oath to the U.S. Constitution to uphold it, and this is so sacred, and I think it's so important for us to remind ourselves that individuals coming to America certainly have to be focused on assimilation rather than creating these havens of radicalization, as we're seeing what's happening in New York City with an individual by the name of Mamdani calling for a global intifada. And that certainly is not just wrong, it's unacceptable. It's immoral. And we need to call it out when we see that. And Americans need to certainly work together to make sure that our motto is upheld: out of many, one. E pluribus unum.
Well said. Well said. Our time is running out with Joel and Anand Samy. I would ask you about this story that has just broken as we wrap things up. More fighting in Gaza this morning. Deaths on both sides. 5 Israeli military, 19 Palestinians. Can it ever end? Can it? I know that's what we're talking about and debating and negotiating. Can it ever end?
In fact, I think we're seeing the final chapter being written. This is certainly very disconcerting and troubling to see so many young men from the IDF being killed by Hamas terrorists. And I think that certain groups and factions may want to create havoc, but we're coming to a conclusion. And that conclusion in Gaza will mean no more Hamas. And it's time for countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, and others to join forces with America and Israel to form a new governing structure for a period of time, just like Germany had it with denazification. We need to see that de-radicalization take place in Gaza, a new educational curriculum being put together, a new governing structure, not Hamas, but others leading it to a new, brighter future for the people of Gaza and the region.
Joel, your insight is always, I'm grateful for it. I enjoy our conversations, and it was good to dig in a little bit this morning. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to visiting with you soon.
Thank you so much indeed. Appreciate being with you all. Blessings to you. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Joel. I appreciate that very much. Joel Anand Samy, host of America's Roundtable. You can hear it on the weekends here on SuperTalk Mississippi, also co-founder of the International Leaders Summit. Dug in a little bit there. Middle East, America relations, Middle East relations within the borders of the countries themselves. Man, it's complicated. Really, really complicated. Because you're looking at hundreds, if not thousands of years of history there. And very divergent mindsets within those countries. My thanks to Joel for joining me this morning. Half an hour left with you. Still got plenty to get to. Mornings with Richard Cross, Super Talk Mississippi. We're back after this.